just have a show of hands. How many people played with the video game last night, just so I have a sense? Good, about 30% of you. That's what I want to talk about is the last Barfighter and how that was made. Almost like, to me, this part of the conference is how the sausages are made. So really getting in the nitty-gritty of how to get one of these things off the ground. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for McKinney. Have offices here in New York and in Durham, North Carolina. And I know when the Innovation Lab people were talking, I think Mr. Lack said 20% projects and initiatives don't work. But we've been pretty successful at McKinney for the past 3 years, giving everybody 10% of their time to innovate. And I think the trade-off with that is, yes, you do not have a focal point for people to try and experiment and build leading ideas faster, which can be a downside. But the positive part about it is suddenly innovation belongs to the entire agency, and there isn't a belief that it's just one group of people or one people in the corner of the building or in a center place where new business happens. And because of that, we've had all sorts of interesting things happen, like our analytics team is experimenting with neuroscience and neuromonitoring of different design experiences and TV ads. We've had people come to us with ideas for startups that we'll be able to get off the ground, and people who aren't assigned to specific client projects can think of ideas and make those happen. And we have a process for monitoring all that and shepherding them through the agency. So what Last Barfighter has been, or is a 10% project that was matched to one of our clients, Big Boss. And for those of you who did not get to play the game, here's just a quick video to show you what it's all about.
There's some people out there who still like to fight, but they don't fight for peace or justice. They just fight for one thing that's left in this world that's still worth fighting for. Beer.
I guess you can never be too rich, too thin, or have enough bass in your presentation. So that was really great. And then we sent that out into the world. I'll talk more about the results later. But we got some really interesting responses, a flash of genius. It's Pace Magazine. It's like everything you didn't know you wanted. And one of the YouTube comments was, if I could hump this thing, I would marry it. So that's a bit of what we did. People love beer, people love video games, right? Arcade games. So now I'd like to introduce you to Adam Carroll, creative technologist, heartbeat of this project, to talk to you about just the innards of how it all happened.
Thanks. That YouTube comment was by a guy named Brandon Mohawk too, which I thought was pretty awesome. So this, I'm just going to walk you through just kind of like a behind the scenes and a making of the Beercade. This idea originated, we were working on one of our insurance clients, which is I don't know if any of you have worked on insurance, but it's the most exciting industry in America. And after we got done with our meeting, it always ends like this because we're all, in the same mindset. So we were bored and we started, bitching about things and talking about things and just doing what we do. And a guy that I work with named Owen and I started talking about arcades and just that experience in that social environment and kind of culture that was and how those don't exist anymore really, and we both missed it. We started talking about beer, and we started talking about arcades and beer, and now it seems like all of the people that we grew up with that were playing in arcades hang out in bars now, and the only arcade games that are in bars anymore are really shitty ones like Big Buck Hunter or Golden Tee. Not that those are really shitty, but they've been around for a long time and they're not super exciting. So that naturally led to, well, why don't you just stick good video games in a bar? Well, that's a Barcade, and in Raleigh and Durham, which is where our McKinney office is based out of, we don't have one of these, and the bars that we have Golden Tee and have Buck Hunter. So Barcades exist. I think there's one in Brooklyn. That didn't seem like it was something that we wanted to do, so we started thinking about more, and we were like, well, why don't we just put a keg inside an arcade cabinet? And not just by tapping it, because everybody taps everything. You can just Google keg in whatever, and you'll get a ton of stuff. So that led us to the Beercade, which is the arcade machine that pours you a beer. And that was really important, as we wanted to marry that experience of the actual arcade machine and the mechanism of pouring the beer had to be tied together. Otherwise, you're just still playing and drinking. We have Big Boss Brewing as a client. It's a local microbrewery out of Raleigh, and we thought that this was a perfect fit for them. They already have a really well-established aesthetic. This was done by us and a guy named Scott Pridgeon, actually, who now works at Crispin. He designed the new Pizza Hut or Domino's box, which is, I think, awesome. So they have a great aesthetic, and we knew that this would be something that would help them stand out, especially as microbreweries. When you're doing beer sampling or tasting or festivals or whatever, there's a sea of people, a sea of tents, a sea of vendors, and when you're a small microbrewery, you have to compete with like Miller Lite, who just hires a bunch of prostitutes to basically walk around in a bunch of skanky clothes. So we wanted this to feel like, Big Boss is kind of a scrappy brewery, and we wanted this to feel like they were cleaning out their basement, and they were like, look at what we found. Like, we forgot about this. We pulled plastic off of it. We rolled it out. So that, after we started concepting games, and Big Boss, all of their beers are named after World War II planes. So the first natural fit was, well, let's do some kind of a two-player or a multiplayer side-scrolling bomber thing that's kind of throwback to like 1942. After we talked about that and kind of like went down that rabbit hole, we realized that that's not really a game. Like, we wanted this to be very social. We wanted it to be like very fast in and out. So we scrapped that and we went to something that I really like. I really like micro games. I really like the fact that there's just these very simple interactions that slowly build over time. And the Game & Watch galleries from like the early Nintendo, I think, are perfect, because they have these like Oil Panic. I don't know if any of you guys have played these. Oil Panic I thought was great. That trampoline game and that octopus game, I grew up playing those. And these kind of set, like these games just help us define what we wanted the experience to be. We knew that we wanted it to be easy to pick up and play, because not everybody's a gamer. And if you're at a bar or a beer festival, you're going to have 50-year-olds, you're going to have 20-year-olds. We wanted there to be a low learning curve, and we wanted it to have limited input. So we decided to go with just 2 buttons and a joystick. Now, after we knew what we wanted it to do, we knew what we didn't want it to do. And I don't know about if there's anybody that likes games out there. I'm sure that there are, but I do not like the current landscape of video games. Like, I think this is great. You're still getting to play with your friends, and it connects people across the country, but it's just not the same. It's not the same as coming home from school and having your neighbor over and like kicking his ass in Mortal Kombat. And regardless of how awesome all video games look, and I am not knocking the Oculus Rift because I have one and I think it's amazing, but no matter how awesome and immersive this is, you're still doing this, which is playing a video game by yourself. And that's not something that we wanted. So after we explored all the options of the games and the interaction mechanisms that we wanted, we decided that the only way that we would be able to recreate the experience that we wanted was if we made what that experience was, which fighting games built arcades. There's that local legend guy that always was kicking everybody's rear ends, and you'd come up and slap your stack of quarters down and play. And that's what we wanted to do, and we knew that we would have to do that with a fighting game. I don't know if anybody else has ever said this or uses this, but I did a project a couple of years ago for a client, and it was like a 2-week project, and they had a very limited budget. And we made a game that basically Santa Claus was lifting weights, and you yelled at him. You played the boot camp guy, and you yelled into your mic, and the louder and faster that you yelled, the more like that's how you played the game. And I thought that was great because you send it out into all these like corporate offices, and you have somebody in a cubicle yelling at their computer, somebody's going to walk by and say, "What the fuck are you doing?" You know, like, and that's what I called lo-fi social. So the game does not tweet. You don't have to tweet at it to play. It doesn't check in Foursquare. It's just straight up old school. How many of you guys have seen this movie? So this movie is about a kid who plays an arcade game. He beats the arcade game. Aliens abduct him and he saves the galaxy. And I can't really remember how we got from the last Starfighter to the last Barfighter, but we felt we really needed to like throw in as much references to the 8. Like we just wanted this to be purely fun. So from the last Starfighter came the last Barfighter. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the character design. This is the packaging for Angry Angel. What we did is we took Big Boss's 5 beers that you could buy year-round in Whole Foods, and we tried to marry them somewhat in the game so that there was a little bit of recognition so that somebody could play the game and still say, oh, I remember this because it feels like it. So Angry Angel, the first thing that we explored was we just did a rough sketch of like a biker, which this is the one that we kind of liked the direction of. We evolved him a little bit to give him a little bit more of a defined silhouette, and the final outcome was this, which I think is good, I guess. So this is Bad Penny. You can see the design. First one we did was a throwback to like blaxploitation, Pam Grier, Grindhousey. This whole, I would have to say if there was a theme to this, it's very Grindhouse. Everybody on the team really likes it. It's purely fun. You know, it's just like straight exploitation. So we tried to pick things that we thought would play well with that. So obviously, Bad Penny, as you saw before, is, you know, already got an African-American lady that's, we felt like that was a perfect marry with like the old kung fu Chinese connections / blaxploitation movies of the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. This started out this way. We evolved it a little bit more, made her a little bit more distinctive, and the final looked like this. The third character is Hell's Bell, who initially started out as just like a Belgian barmaid and with flaming hair. We explored a little bit different like silhouettes just to make sure that they felt different. We had a fat version, which I kind of think is funny. Ultimately, we didn't go with it because when I think Hell's Bell, and I think we all kind of collectively agreed, the bell in that refers to Southern belles, so we went with a straight up Hell's Southern Belle, which is just a demon woman from the South. And Blanco Diablo is Spanish for the white devil, I think. I don't speak fluent Spanish, but I think that's what it stands for. So we started again with a more traditional, like kung fu-y white devil, explored him a little bit more, different silhouette, and then ultimately we still, you know, we felt like this was still too kung fu-y and we wanted to have a little bit more fun with it, so we played off of the Spanish aspect of it and made him a matador / devil. And if you played the game, he like farts at you and like a unicorn comes out of his chest. He's just weird. Anyway. All right, so the last one is High Roller. And High Roller started out as kind of like a New Orleans gambler. This was the first sketch. We did another exploration. And again, we ended up with something that was a little bit more of a throwback to like the Daniel Day-Lewis, like tougher gangs of New York style. And I actually really like this. This is my favorite character out of the game. And I did not draw this one. This was drawn by a kid named Jacob Stralin, who is, I think, a sophomore at Southern Cal Arts, and he's amazing. So that's incredible. So that was the characters. And after we defined the characters, we decided that, or we knew there was time to start developing the game. And the game is actually fairly simple. Over the course of the development process, it was pretty much just one artist and one developer. Depends on who that was. Sometimes I was the same person, sometimes it wasn't. The developer was either myself or a producer / developer. Like Jim said, this is a 10% project, so when we started this, we wanted to figure out how we could do this with technology that was already available to us. And we knew, I started out as a Flash developer, Flash designer developer, so it's where I have my roots. And it's just really fast, it's really easy, and you can pretty much do everything that you want artistic-wise, art-wise, and animation-wise, and coding-wise, at least for fast prototypes. It's very fast, easy to use, and everybody's pretty much familiar with it because it's an established platform. We used analog controls, and we converted them with an iPac keyboard modulator, so everything with the first prototype of the game was all analog, just like you would play it in the 80s. The Flash game and the controllers are obviously hooked up to a microcontroller, and the microcontroller is hooked up to essentially the insides of like a fountain drink machine. So we did this first sketch. Originally, this started out being kind of like as old school as you could get. We wanted to do 8-bit or 16 or 32-bit, something that kind of felt throwback-ish. But that got outvoted, so we explored another one, which is kind of a more, you'll have to excuse the same bottle. It's a little bit more of a skeuomorphic design. And again, that got outvoted, and eventually we ended up with a more graphic representation of the characters in the game screens. So we had that built. The last thing that we had to build was the cabinet. And this is the original sketch that we did. It's very rough. It's the first thing that we ever did. And then like just an even rougher line drawing. And if you can see that number in the bottom, the $1,200, that's what we priced out just by sitting down, figuring out everything that we wanted, and then Googling all the prices. And actually, I think that the machine in the end wound up being like $1,138 or something like that. So it was relatively inexpensive to make. We tested out the tech. Obviously, in the lab, we have or in our offices, we have a bar, and we just rolled the kegs out and hooked up all the basic circuitry and ran some tests. And I work with a girl named Stevie. She's one of my coworkers, and her dad is an aerospace engineer. And he lives in Winston-Salem. And he is actually one of the people that designed the Apollo spacesuits. And he has a really great workshop / blacksmithing station at his home. So we went down there for 2 days and constructed this cabinet. After we, I'm going to back up. After we did this rough sketch, we did our research and we figured out the correct dimensions, the correct angles, and everything like that. So this is actually very rough. We ended up doing something a little bit better, and this is a rough picture of just the frame. I'm just going to skip through and show you some of these pictures real quick. So this is the frame. This is the control panel graphic. Here's a picture of the frame built, printed, wrapped in vinyl, and with the graphic applied. Here's a close-up of the taps. So we made custom taps for this. So we had a Beercade that worked, that functioned, that had a game in it. And I think, personally for me, one of the best things about arcade games is the side art. The side art is usually not representational at all of the game. It used to drive me nuts as a kid because I'd buy Mega Man 2 and the picture on the front of it looked fucking awesome, and then you play it and it's, not shitty, but not what you expected either. I grew up, I love Frank Frazetta, I love Conan the Barbarian. Frank Frazetta designed the very first Star Wars poster. They didn't go with the one that he painted, but they used his layout and they had somebody repaint it, and it's just a very iconic. He has that straight in the middle at the hero standing. He's standing on top of something, but it's painted, and it doesn't really feel 80s video game. 80s video games are traditionally very graphic. They're very vector-based. So we wanted to marry Frank Frazetta with that, and what we ended up with was 2 side graphics. The first one is a dude raising his glass and 2 naked chicks on his leg. Now, to be politically correct, we also included the other side, which is a girl with 2 naked dudes on her feet. And here's what the machine looks like side by side. And that's it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim to let him tell you about what the internet said about it.
So, look at that. So we got this out the world. We knew it was a success with Big Boss. And we sent out 3 tweets announcing this and got a tremendous amount of response. All sorts of media folks picked up. You merge beer and arcade games, you usually have a hit on your hands. So there's a lot of pickup in terms of different media properties. For Big Boss, distributor requests went up 200% based on this game and the press that they had, and a large amount of earned media that both helped McKinney and helped Big Boss, more importantly, and quite a few PR impressions. But what was important in the last part about this is, from McKinney's point of view, we've made sure we didn't give away all of the intellectual property, and we've continued to pursue how to productize what came out of 10%. So Big Boss owns the game mechanics that Adam talked about. Obviously, the characters are based on the beers, etc. But in terms of the innards and the system for how beer can be rewarded based on gameplay is aspects that we own. And then we also, a lot of people reached out to us. We're working with a group called Funko that builds Golden Tee machines for arcade games. They have a throughput of about 10 or 15,000 games a year, and they now can build this format game for us. The game you played yesterday came fresh off of their assembly line / shop. So we know we can scale this as we need to, as other clients come our way and want to have this happen. So that is the story of the last Barfighter. I think we have a few minutes if there are any questions from the group for either Adam or me.
So let's just say I'm a beer company. How much would it cost for you to make the same thing for me?
The machines themselves, retail, given the more industrial things from construction, retail for around $6,000 or $7,000. So that's the individual machines. And then there's the development of the game itself. And depending on complexity, levels, fitting that with the brand, it just would vary. That's just normal game development time. And because the mechanics on the inside are relatively simple and of today's technology, that's not a huge cost. Anything else?
All right, thank you guys. Oh, sorry,
One more.
Random question as kind of the client in the room. Would you sell it to another beer manufacturer? Or, yeah, it's kind of an ethical question, eh?
Because our client they're in the Southeast, they're a significant microbrewery, but they don't see a lot of the national distributors as competitors.
They actually don't and can't deliver or distribute outside of North Carolina right now as well, so that helps.
Yeah. So yes. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you guys.